Hi everyone. So today we will be discussing about the difference between scope identity, @ identity, and ident current. So the difference between these three is in scope identity, scope identity returns us the last identity value inserted in the identity column in the current scope and session, whereas @ identity gives us the last identity value generated for any table in the current session and across all scopes, whereas ident current returns the last value generated for a specific table in any session or scope. So basically a scope can be a batch, it can be a procedure, view, or trigger. The difference between these three is that the scope identity, it gives the identity value in the current session and scope, whereas the @ identity, it works for the current session but across all the scopes. And whereas ident current, it works for a specific table irrespective of the session or scope. Let's now see the difference with the help of an example. So I'm creating two tables having same columns, that is ID, which is an identity column, and name, which is a wildcard column, in both test A and test B table. So I've already returned the queries. I'm executing these queries to create the table, and the tables has been created. We can see here that there is no records in the table. So in the first table, you can see that the identity column is starting from 1 and it is auto incremented by 1, whereas in table test B, the identity column starts from 100 and it is auto incremented by 1. So I'm also creating, I have written certain queries to insert data in test A table, but in order to insert data in test B table, I'm creating a trigger on test A table. This trigger, basically what it does is whenever a record is inserted in table A, it will insert a record in table B. Okay, so I'm creating a for insert trigger on table A. So I have written a query for creating a trigger. I'm using this create trigger name. This is a trigger name on table name. For insert as begin, insert into test B, that is the second table, and we are selecting name from inserted. Inserted is a virtual table which is used for inserting data in the trigger. You also have a related table like this. So I'm creating triggers here. Like the trigger has been created. So now I'm inserting data into the table. As of now, I'm only inserting a particular value, that is ABC, into the table. So when I execute this query, I see that one record is inserted in both the tables. So when I see the data in the table, I will see that the records are inserted in both the table. In table A, in table test A, one record is inserted and the ID column starts from 1, because the identity column was starting from 1 in test A table, and whereas in test B table, ID is starting from 100, as the identity value is starting from 100 for table B. You can see the same in the create table statements. So this data has been inserted in the table, and now if I want to insert some more records, then I can do the same. I'm inserting some other records. Now I can check the data in the table. So in both the table, 5 records are there with different IDs, in first table ID starting from 1 and ending to 5, and in second table starting from 100 and ending to 104. Now let's see what is the output of these queries in the based on these tables. Okay, so first of all, we are checking the data for @ identity. So as as I have told you before, @ identity returns the last value inserted in the identity column irrespective of the scope. Okay, so it returns the last identity value based on the current session, but irrespective of the scope. So this window is a current session, and here we have two scopes. Like first is the, like I have written a insert statement here, that is a test A. But whenever the data is created in test A, whenever the data is inserted in test A, it is calling a trigger and data is getting inserted in test B. So the last inserted value irrespective of the scope. Okay, so when I execute this, I will see it will return the data, that is the identity column value that is present in test B, that is called through the trigger. So irrespective of the scope, it has returned us this value. Whereas scope identity, it is dependent on the current session as well as scope. So when I run this statement, it will give us the value as 5. The last identity value it will give us is 5, just because it is dependent on a particular scope. And the value for ident current for both the tables, if I execute this, the value will be 5 and 104 based on the table respectively, as it gives the last identity value of a particular table irrespective of the scope as well as the session. So let's see how it is dependent on the session. So for this, I'm copying these select queries and I'm executing it in another window. Okay, so here, if I'm running the @ identity query as well as this scope identity query, as both of these queries are dependent on the current session, these will result in null. Okay, and whereas ident current, it is independent of the scope as well as the session, these queries will return us the value of the last identity value inserted on the particular table. So hope this is clear to you, and thanks for watching.